The Frog Prince. Once there was a princess who lived in a beautiful land that had a palace and was surrounded by a deep forest. Once, on her birthday, she was given a golden ball. She loved the ball very much and would play with it often. One day, she was playing with it near a pond. All of a sudden, the ball fell into the pond. The pond was so deep that she could not see the bottom. "Oh! How will I get it back?" wailed the princess. She began to cry and said, "Alas, if I could only get my ball again, I would give all my fine clothes and jewels and everything that I have in the world." A frog sitting on a rock nearby heard her cry. "What is the matter, princess?" he asked. "Maybe I can help you." The princess told him that her golden ball had fallen into the pond. The frog said he could bring it back to her. "In return, I do not want your pearls and jewels and fine clothes. Instead, you must let me eat from your plate and sleep on your bed for 3 days," said the frog. The princess heartily agreed, thinking she could break her word to the frog once he got the ball out of the water. The frog then put his head down, and dived deep into the water. After a little while, he came up with the ball in his mouth and threw it on the edge of the pond. The princess was happy to see it. She returned to the palace immediately. That evening, when the princess sat in her room, there was a knock on the palace door. It was the frog. The princess was unhappy to see him. She had no choice but to keep her word. "Pray lift me up and seat me next to you," said the frog to the princess. "Carry me upstairs and put me to bed." And the princess, though very unwilling, took him up in her hand and put him upon the pillow of her own bed where he slept all night long. The next morning, the frog jumped and hopped downstairs, straight out of the palace. The princess saw that the frog was gone and was so happy. But then, the frog came back that evening for 2 more days. The frog ate from her plate and slept on her bed. On the 4th morning, the princess woke up and gasped in surprise. Instead of the frog, there was a young prince sitting beside her bed. "A witch had put a curse on me. You have lifted the curse by letting me stay with you for 3 days, he said in a grateful voice. Now, both the prince and the princess became very good friends, and over the course of a few years, the young princess agreed to marry the prince. On their special day, they had a special ride in a brightly colored carriage, with 8 beautiful horses decked with plumes of feathers and a golden harness, that drove up to take them. They lived happily ever after. Moral of the story: it is always a good habit to keep your promises. If you behave kindly towards others, others will be kind to you. Hansel and Gretel. Once by a forest there lived a woodcutter. He had children, Hansel and Gretel. They also had a stepmother who disliked them and often told the woodcutter to leave them in the forest. One day, she forced the woodcutter to take his children with him to the forest and finally leave them there. The children were passing by and luckily overheard the stepmother. They gathered some pebbles to leave a trail for themselves to come home. When they returned that night, the stepmother was filled with rage. She argued with the woodcutter and made him take them to the forest again. This time, the children took a loaf of bread to leave a trail along the way. When they reached the woods, the children played while their father pretended to work. A while later, the woodcutter sadly left them alone and walked away. When the children couldn't see their father, they held hands and followed the bread trail. But the birds and animals had eaten the bread they had left behind. Poor Hansel and Gretel were now lost in the forest. The children walked a long distance till they came across a gingerbread house made of cookies, candies, and cakes. They were hungry too, so they started eating the window and relished every bite. That house belonged to a witch who promised the children delicious food to eat and soft beds to sleep in. She opened the door and invited them in. Once inside, the witch put Hansel in cage and made Gretel cook and clean. She wanted to feed Hansel and fatten him up before cooking and eating him. One day, Gretel made some soup, but the witch yelled at her saying, "I want to eat your brother today. See if the oven is hot." "I need to save my brother," is all that poor worried Gretel could think of. The witch then went to the larder to pick up some herbs and berries. Gretel saw her chance and took it. She locked the witch in. Gretel then released her brother and checked if he was well. Then, they took the witch's wealth, once again, started for their home together. When the children reached their house, the woodcutter was delighted to see them. He said, "My children, you found your way." Their stepmother has left them, and so, Hansel, Gretel and their father lived happily from then on. Moral of the story: do not trust strangers, even if they treat you well. In a lot of situations, the ability to think on your feet can help. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to Little Stars Stories for Kids for more interesting stories.